After being in financial services for more than 10 years, I keep seeing these three presumably responsible financial decisions that people make without knowing they can be potential time bombs waiting to happen. Today I want to talk about them because most of us would not realize what could potentially go wrong with these financial decisions that many responsible and highly competent people are making. Let me share the first mistake through a case study. There was once I got introduced to this client who just got divorced. She shared with me she was paying for this investment policy that was taking up a sizable portion of her income. Apparently, she was funding this policy through a joint account shared by her then husband and her. And after the divorce, she took over the payment because the policy was bought in her name. When I did a policy review, I realized this client has no insurance. And that was when we realized a problem. She has no excess budget to fund any protection plans. You might be wondering whether not having insurance is even a real problem. This client has quite a bit of fixed financial commitments, including this investment policy that she was funding. Her emergency funds was only sufficient to last her for 6 months. So in the event of an unexpected health event like a chronic illness, where she cannot work for a prolonged period, she is very likely to become unable to fund all these financial commitments. Basically, living expenses would become an issue, her mortgage and investment policy would be at risk, and on top of which, if there is any unexpected bills arising from medical needs, she won't be able to fund those as well. Which leads me to the first common financial mistake. Many of us take up long-term commitments without factoring in downside risks. This is common even among supposedly responsible and highly competent individuals who can be high achievers in the workplace. Some potential reasons why this could happen may be due to a lack of interest to pay for insurance or not seeing a need to get coverage because we may feel that we are still young, thus assume health conditions won't happen to us. Sometimes, as a high income earner, you may believe you will eventually have the ability to self-insure, but it may not occur to you that illness might happen before you have accumulated a sizable portfolio to do so. Just this year, I saw in the news that the CEO of Mala restaurant Hot Hideout got diagnosed for cancer at the age of 26. 26 years old is young, and if you think about it, if chronic illness hits us at a young age, will we have sufficient savings to fund our own recovery? I don't know if this CEO has any insurance, but in a typical scenario of a young adult going through multiple life stages, our decision making would often be made based on our active income, such as buying a house. Most of the time, you will not think or make that decision based on whether you have any insurance at all. So in cases when there is no income protection in place, we will not be in trouble if we really have sufficient liquidity to fund our own down period, or else our lifestyle assets will be at risk. The second common mistake I see happening often is somewhat related to the first mistake. This one is common among parents. They buy more insurance for their kids than themselves, which leads me to another case study. This client of mine is a business owner and invests heavily in property. Her business generates about $1 million a year, but her business is a one-man show. So if she is sick, basically the business cannot run. She earns well, but because she invests quite substantially in property, she has a huge mortgage. So when I review her policies, I realized her kids have all the necessary insurances, but this client had a few million in death coverage but only 200k in critical illness cover. Don't even have early stage critical illness. Her children have more critical illness coverage than her. So I asked her, how come your kids' coverage is more than your own coverage? The reason she told me is common among parents in the same situation. Firstly, parents love their children a lot. So when they have a newborn, they meet their insurance agent and buy all the coverage the agent says the child needs. And usually they do it very willingly. Also because if they buy insurance for their kids at a young age, the premiums are cheap and affordable. So they buy quite a substantial amount of premiums without thinking too much. On the other hand, they usually review their own coverage when they are much older. And if they are high income, the coverage they need is also so much more expensive. That's usually the reason why they end up underinsuring themselves. As parents, you often forget you are the main breadwinner and your kids are the dependents. What this means is, if you don't adequately insure yourself and something happens to you, the whole household will be at risk. Because you can't activate your child's insurance policies to fund your own loss of income in the event of critical illness or death. The thing about protecting against these risk events is that it can happen to anyone regardless of age or status. If you look at the sudden death of Derek Ong, co-founder of Tipsy Collective, he left behind 2 kids and his wife. I'm not sure if he had sufficient insurance coverage. However, if he didn't, then his young family would be financially impacted, especially since he passed away unexpectedly at age 35 and his children are still very young. Now, the third common mistake that happens very often is having too much risk exposure during retirement. Most of the time, people think they are being responsible when they invest most of their money. And to a lot of people, investing in stocks, especially blue chip, is not high risk. However, I met a client in his 60s who told me he never wants to touch investments again, and his story taught me an important lesson about risk management as a young banker. That client told me his original retirement plan was supposed to be 8 years ago. All his funds was invested in the stock market, and it was doing well until the Lehman Brothers crisis happened. And that year, he happened to also want to retire. So when all his stock prices dropped drastically, he had to delay his retirement till the market recovered. And once he exited the market, he only puts his money in principal guaranteed instruments. The market crashed by more than 50% during the subprime crisis. This means that if the client had $2 million invested, he could lose up to $1 million. Imagine saving up a sizable retirement nest egg and seeing it reduced by half at an age where you might not have the means to earn it back. That's quite scary. Unless you are technical, the sequence of return risk is something that is not commonly talked about. It basically refers to the danger that you need to withdraw your funds at a time when the market is not in your favor, thus affecting the overall rate of return of your portfolio, which is exactly the situation this client got caught in. His investment portfolio was doing very well for years. However, he unfortunately wanted to retire at the same year one of the most massive market crashes happened. And this can happen to any one of our portfolios. And retirement planning should not be planned on the basis that the worst case scenarios don't happen. That's why it is not recommended to have a lopsided risk exposure during retirement. It is better to have a balanced portfolio. This means having exposure to instruments that are for wealth preservation as well as instruments that are for wealth accumulation, and both don't serve the same purpose. That's all for today's episode. If you would like to hear more case studies like this for high income families in Singapore, hit the subscribe button and I'll see you in the next video.